Hi, Trevor. Lovely to have to join you in this conversation. Very interesting reading about your background, but I thought I'd give you an opportunity to kind of give us an overview about who you are and your role within the university, particularly the fact that the university is joining the ranks regarding apprenticeships.
Thank you. So lovely to have to be invited to be on your show. Yes, so my name is I'm a doctor, an academic doctor. I'm part of the Kent Business School, and I am the formal titles is Reader and Director of Studies. So Reader is an old term for kind of associate assistant professor, and Director of Studies basically means I look after the degree apprenticeships across the business school. The University of Kent have 6 different divisions or departments, if you want to call it by the old name, and the business school is one of those. And then we have around 6 different provisions across the business school, from undergrad to postgrad apprenticeship provisions.
And how did the university sort of get into apprenticeships? When did it sort of come into the apprenticeship space?
Well, I'm about 4 months into my role. I started on the 1st of October, but with most universities, this was a government-led initiative. 2016, they started talking about a new way of doing apprenticeships and connecting that to degrees, which hadn't really existed up until that point in time. And so that was really officially from 2017 that universities got involved in what we now know as degree apprenticeships. So Kent has been involved in these since then, chopping and changing with this, that, and the other. The business school probably has been doing this now for about 3, maybe 4 years. Some being quite new and others just kind of ticking along. Yeah.
And what sort of apprenticeships does the business school do?
So in terms of undergrad, we do, like most others, we do the Chartered Manager degree apprenticeships. So we offer a accelerated route, which is 3 years. We offer the traditional standard route, which is 4 years, and we also offer this online. And then postgrad, this is where it gets interesting, because you've got different standards that are produced, and so you can have different degree apprenticeships linked to those standards. So we've got an SLA, a Senior Leader Apprenticeship. So that's linked to our MBA. It's linked to at the moment, an MA in Leadership and Management, which we deliver in London, and then the MSc Healthcare and Management, which we deliver in Medway. We also have an Operations Research Specialist standard. So this is connected to our Business Analytics MSc. And then we also have, I'm just trying to remember them now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think I've covered all of them. MBA, ORS, and then our SLAs. Yeah, so those are all the ones that we're doing within the business school.
It goes to show that there is just within the business school itself, there's a wide range of different sort of apprenticeships available out there. But so, how have degree apprenticeships sort of changed student recruitment as they've come in and as they're progressing?
I mean, this is a very, very interesting question. It's a complex one, because degree apprentices are employed. And this is quite a thing that a lot of people don't quite understand. I go into schools and I go into different employer organizations to kind of do some myth busting around this. It's not a placement and it's not an internship. So let's get that clear from the start. So it's, they're not just there in a company for 2 months or 6 months. They are full-time employed. They're on a full-time contract, which means in order to do a degree apprenticeship at the university, you need to be in employment first. It's very rare that the university recruits for the employer. If anything, we work in conjunction with the employer so that we make students aware that there is an alternative to university called degree apprenticeships. And if you're interested, then, approach the companies that we are at least engaged with as a degree apprenticeship and go via that route. And I know that this is going to come up a little bit later in one of your other questions, but different companies will have different requirements in terms of who they would employ. And this is based quite often on GCSE results, A-level results, those kinds of things. Some companies are a little bit better in terms of who they take on board than others in terms of a widening access and participation agenda. And then we get those students. At Kent Business School, if anybody wanted to do our accelerated degree apprenticeship, we tell the employers that our oh my gosh, what do we call it? Access requirement, the entry requirement, there we go, that's the word, is way higher than our standard one. And that's simply because they are doing more than 90 credits a year, which makes them a full-time student, which then affects NSS and affects the league tables. And a lot of universities would be influenced in a very similar way, particularly if they are quite high up on the league tables. But the standard one is a much lower entry requirement.
Oh, that's very interesting. I think one thing's interesting from what you're saying is that particularly with degree apprenticeships, the employer plays a crucial aspect of it. But for many people, and particularly if we're talking from underrepresented communities, underserved communities, they see well, it has been seen generally that universities are the gold standard when it comes to social mobility. And as we have found, apprenticeships outside of university have been providing the social mobility for a lot of students, for a lot of young early talent. But with universities coming into the fold of the apprenticeships, is social mobility being addressed, or is it the case of there's a middle class grab where people who could afford to go to university are now and pay the tuition fees are now switching to apprenticeships because it's just an alternative way of them saving money?
I mean, it's a complex and loaded question. So let me try and unpick it one bit at a time. I used to work for the Greenwich School of Management. We had about a 96% BAME representation, the largest in the UK. We were a private university, and back in the day, a lot of the private universities pretty much were the groundbreaking ones in terms of widening access, although that's shifting and changing quite a lot with a lot of London-based universities. We also had about a 16% representation of polar postcodes 1 and 2. So in terms of widening access, we did a sterling job. We had quite a lot of mature students as well, probably an average age of the early 30s, something like that. And this has always been my agenda. This has been my passion and drive, is widening access. Coming from South Africa, education for me is an absolute privilege. And if somebody wants the opportunity and they want to work at it, wow, it's very rewarding to help them through their process. I think, and this is my opinion, I think the UK higher educational context is complex. You've got league tables, and they're not always accurate and representing clearly what's going on in the background. The UK is, I mean, we make sketches of this kind of thing. The UK is quite class sensitive, if I'm allowed to say it in that way. We didn't have these kind of things in South Africa. Of course, growing up during apartheid, it was all race. But after Nelson Mandela, it was open for everybody, but we didn't really have such a class focus, as I've discovered, having been in the UK for 20-something years. So you have all these complexities. I was a program director for a Church of England course, training priests in the Church of England, and even there, in terms of the institutions that they chose to have the priests training, undergrad and postgrad, and now their common awards is delivered by Durham University, which is one of the top 10 universities in the UK. There still does seem to be this drive in terms of association, particularly with Russell Group universities and so on. So this is the complexity within which we're going into when we're still recruiting even degree apprenticeships. The government's intention, clearly, when they set these up, was for social mobility, to offer an opportunity for particularly youth employment to go up, and to offer an alternative and a way in which young people can be involved in employment. But I'm a realist enough to say that not everybody is making that a priority, and they are still protecting league tables. They are still protecting other aspects, and therefore it could appear that there is a middle class grab, where, and I mean, bearing in mind, of course, you only pay back your student fees when you cross over a threshold. So again, when we talk middle class, we're talking a particular salary range. If you don't get across that threshold, you're not required to pay back the student loan. So it's all of these complexities thrown into the mix that gets us to think about degree apprenticeships. But again, sorry, last point as well, universities do have the choice in terms of who they take on board as employers. And if you are taking on board an employer as part of your degree apprenticeship, which does have a widening access agenda, then you're working together in terms of something that you both are passionate about. And we do have those kind of employees who are looking to increase their diversity and inclusion.
So a quick question as an add-on to that: could degree apprenticeships be a route for tackling social mobility?
I think it is. And the reason why I say that is, and again, I'm purely basing here on work-based learning theory and pedagogy. Quite often, in a normal traditional university setting, students are taught within a very particular discipline. And sometimes what can happen, and hence employability becomes a big agenda in universities, is that there is an overemphasis on knowledge transmission and not on the formation of the person in terms of professional values. There's no point in you knowing about, for example, business and business management, but you don't behave professionally in the workplace. You're going to get fired very quickly. So part of what we do as degree apprenticeships is we have to enable our students to engage not just with the knowledge, but also skills and behaviors. And what really does set apart a degree apprenticeship is just how well they do the skills and behaviors. So, for example, I'll give you a really good example. We had an employer and some of their employees, the degree apprentices, raising a question with us, why do mistakes still happen in program management within a program? Now, for me, that's the wrong question. The question is, we're making you aware of things that could be still improved, because no organization is perfect, because human beings are involved. But the question is, how can we use these opportunities to make our employees, the degree apprentices, more resilient in terms of flexibility, being agile in the workplace, dealing with things when they change, such as when COVID threw everybody into the same boat and moved them at home. And it's those kinds of connections between the theory and the practice that makes a degree apprenticeship very different, I think, from traditional university education, and therefore it enables social mobility to take place, because you're able to adapt much better in the workplace, because it's the workplace behavior is not separated from the knowledge that you're gaining at university. They're one and the same process.
Very interesting. So, okay, hypothetically speaking, you have some powers, and you are allowed to make some changes to degree apprenticeships in terms of how they are run or how they're delivered or the structure of them. What's two changes or what's two reforms you would change or you would have suggested to enhance degree apprenticeships?
You sent me these questions beforehand, and I really struggled with this one. In an ideal world, what would I like? And what would I like to create? And I was pondering on this. I think, and I think this relates to the agenda of this session as well, I think we can still do way better in terms of access. I do think all those complexities I mentioned, I think they do still influence a lot of what goes on in terms of recruitment and so on. So I think we can still do a lot more. The other thing that slightly concerns me is, and this would be another change that I'll try and make somehow, is we no longer live in a, I don't know, what would you call it, uni-national society. Although this is Great Britain and it needs to be, a UK-based company, you will very quickly work across different cultures, etc. When I think about the way in which the standards, particularly for the CMDA, has been created, there doesn't seem to be any real emphasis on cross-cultural working. And I think in a multicultural society that Britain is, and also a multicultural world, where you will end up maybe potentially working in France or working in the States or something like that, that ability to be able to work effectively outside of your own cultural assumptions, I think, is a vitally important skill for the future of work. And I don't see that emphasis there. And that would be another change that I would bring in. So increase the diversity, which sort of, I guess, adds to the second one, and increase the ability to work across different nationalities and cultures.
I think that that's a very nice part to end it. I think the two parts you mentioned is, one is really an organizational change, and one is a learning culture. So there's an organizational culture and there's a learning culture that could be influenced. And I really like that. I think it's important that people are not just aware of the culture that they're in, but also the cultures around them, even if they're not directly exposed to them. Thank you very much for this conversation for National Apprenticeship Week. I really appreciate your time, Trevor.
No worries. Thank you for having me.